Look at me.
Girl with the Pearl Earring is a story about a painting and how it came into being.
Some people would call it a literary adaptation. I call it a domestic thriller. It's the story of a young girl who goes to work in the household of the master painter Johannes Vermeer and strikes up an extraordinary relationship with him.
Fine skin. This will make verdigris.
And it's about desire and lust and all of these things.
They fall in love with each other because they see the world the same way, and she becomes a pawn in a game when the patron who really finances Vermeer's life decides that he's going to use her to get at Vermeer.
I think she ought to be in the painting. A tavern scene to make a change for you. Great could come and serve me.
And you see the pressures on an artist who really wants to create for his own sake, but is hampered by the fact that he also has this big family to support.
Coming up on Anatomy of a Scene.
Cut that, please.
Director Peter Weber and his crew recreate a 17th century banquet for a scene from Girl with a Pearl Earring.
There is nothing worse to shoot in a film than a big scene round a table.
The production designer had to get those rooms absolutely accurate, down to every detail. Everything had to be accurate.
We wanted to make it very beautiful, but beauty can really be a trap. Girl with a Pearl Earring is really inspired by the painting of the same name. It's an amazing portrait. I mean, it's known as the Mona Lisa of the North. It's a really iconic vision of a young girl. The film is adapted from a novel of the same name, written by Tracy Chevalier. And I think what Tracy really wanted to do was to discover what the story was behind this painting. And it's an imagined story. Greet, who's played by Scarlett Johansson, turns up at the house, and we see a household that's under threat financially, where they're really reliant on commissions from a patron in order to survive. The other thing is that Vermeer, who's a very slow painter, has finally finished this painting, and they will finally receive the money for the painting.
Before the scene starts, Greet has been sent on an errand to take an invitation to Van Ryffen, the patron.
So, finished at last. Honoured guest. It was the old woman's idea to combine the birth feast and the viewing. She's a tight fist. I won't turn out for small beer and biscuits, tell her. Me and the brat deserve a proper feast.
And she sees that he's a powerful man and a very dangerous man.
The scene that we're talking about, it's the first big scene where all the characters come together.
It takes you into a world you've never seen through the eyes of a young girl. And they're setting up the patron-painter relationships without the audience ever feeling that you're setting up the social order.
The scene has two parts. The first part is the montage of preparations, and the second part is the banquet.
He thinks we don't know how to celebrate a birth, does he?
The montage is the raw anatomy of the maid lifestyle.
It gives you, I think, a sense that it's important not only to be well off, but to show that you are well off.
So we understand that this is costing them, that there's an outlay, you know, that you have to spend money in order to get money back.
The opening of the feast is this beautiful shot of Van Ryffen and his family arriving on a barge.
We then cut to Scarlett in the backyard, looking through this window, and you realise she's separated from this, that she belongs to a different world.
Van Ryffen is the man at the centre of the feast. He's the man who must be pleased and placated because he is actually the money.
Vermeer's wife, Katerina, is desperate that Vermeer gets more work, and Vermeer is distant and uninvolved.
Pray tell us what you think.
This is good. Color, perspective is true, the illusion is perfect.
He hates to be on public display. He doesn't do that. He resents the fact that that's part of his job as an artist. Maria Tins asks Van Ryven whether he's planning to commission another painting, which is crucial to their survival.
And have you considered a subject for your next commission?
Considered? It's already in hand, didn't I tell you? A coming fellow from Amsterdam, studied under Rembrandt van Rijn, though who hasn't these days?
It's a huge bombshell, a huge grenade that he drops into this moment, because everybody knows the consequences of that, but have to try and be polite enough to pretend that this is not catastrophic news for the family.
Really, this scene sets the plot in motion, and it sets up all the story strands that are then played out through the rest of the movie.
The process that we went through to get from the book to the film is a kind of, I think, quite a good example of the evolution of scenes in the process of script writing and filmmaking. This scene doesn't exist in this form in the book. There are two scenes that it's based on. There was a birth feast, and then there was a separate viewing scene.
To bring the book to the screen, screenwriter Olivia Hettried needed to compress different social events into one single drama.
In a book, you can establish things over a much longer period of time than you can in a film. A film has to have these pinpointed moments. And so Olivia decided to take these two and put them together. And it makes an awful lot of sense because you know you need to have a big scene in which all this stuff gets established.
And I think the effect it had is there was more drama in the scene because you understood that this birth feast had been a huge outlay and there's no money in the house.
The scene in the film is very different from the scenes in the book, mainly because the book is completely from the point of view of Greet, the servant. But this particular scene, I feel it's the first time in the film that it broadens out to include what other people are thinking. So you can see what Maria Tins is thinking, you can see what Katerina is thinking, you can see a bit what Vermeer is thinking.
And so you're establishing all these things, but they're all through her eyes. And she thinks her master, Vermeer, is the master and probably as grand as you get. But now she finds herself in a room where Van Ryven is the guest of honor. And so she's beginning to understand the power relationships that work here.
Good set design should tell the story, it should reveal character, and architecture can really create mood. You know, you use certain materials, a lot of wood in this instance, you light it in a certain way, and that really helps to reveal certain elements of the story.
To represent 17th century society, the filmmakers needed to recreate in their set's architecture the actual experience of Flemish life.
We designed a set which was the house. So each room connected into the next room exactly as it does in the film.
The courtyard was here, and that really did come in through that door to the cooking kitchen, the washing kitchen, and that connected to the hall, and up those stairs was the studio.
So when Greet looks through the window from the yard, she is truly looking in through the window into the dining room. There's no trickery there, which is very unusual for a built set.
Advantage for the actors was that they really felt they were living in that house. Every morning, as a scene was being set up in there, the director would just sort of say to Joanna, who'd play Tannika, the maid, we're doing this scene, will you get it sorted out? And she would, you know, bustle around with the props guy and get the house working to do what would be necessary for that scene.
One of the things that's really surprising about the way people lived then is that there was much less separation of rooms into functions. They had one big room which everything happened in. So in the background of the feast, you have Vermeer and Katerina's bed, which is a major piece of furniture in the room.
It was not enough for the filmmakers to duplicate 17th century interiors. They also had to find a way to replicate the Dutch canals that bordered Vermeer's home.
When you think about creating the streets of Delft, that's not too difficult from a production point of view. The problem really was the canals. And we were very, very amazed and fortunate to find that there was a backlot set in Luxembourg. that had been built around canals. And so we were able to build our sets on top of their canals.
This is a period of painting where there's a lot of domestic detail. What that means to us nowadays is that we have this incredible wealth of almost documentary-like detail of what life was like at the time.
The filmmakers then had to create a kitchen that not only looked historically accurate, but in which the servants could actually prepare a feast.
We really had to create a 17th century kitchen. We had to have open fireplace, was very important. We had to have a lot of buckets filled up with real, like, grain salt, and we had a lot of dead animals everywhere. We had reproduced also the Vermeer pattern of the original glass windows out of the paintings. He mixed two different kinds of handmade glass together in one window. It was very unusual.
The glass is all cracked and you can't quite see through it properly, and very much how it would have been in the period, you know, rather than the lovely smooth glass we get nowadays. All of this really helps, I think, you to understand that there is this world she's not part of, and she's there very much as an observer.
In moving between the galley and the dining hall, the set designers needed a visual means to highlight the class difference between Griet and her master.
There's a real difference in the colour range between the kitchen and the rather grand room where the feast is. You have very earthy, peasant-like colours in the kitchen. You know, you have thick, dense smoke as well from the cooking that's going on. It feels like a working space. And then when you go into the room next door where the feast is being served, we see that at night time, wonderful glowing candle lights. It makes you feel very sumptuous. We have reds, we have golds, we have greens. It's, again, I mean, it's a very simple device, but it really helps in terms of understanding the social structure of that household and the degree of effort to which they've gone to make this patron feel like he's getting value for money.
The really beautiful light is upstairs in the studio. Downstairs, it's darker in places, and so a very simple set of lighting choices dictate how the house must really have felt, which all help to contribute to the sense of reality of this place.
On period films, it's important to keep the dark, because the people lived with darkness, so it's important not to forget it.
To emulate the atmosphere of a 17th century painting, cinematographer Eduardo Serra had to find a way for his light to fill the room as it would have for a Dutch master.
In the kitchen, it had to go from light to dark. The way the set was lit, with light coming only from the window, that would meet the general feeling of the painting. In dinner scene, light is supposed to come from the candles.
But candles wouldn't provide that amount of light. So what Eduardo did here is purportedly all the light is coming from these candles, but actually we have a series of soft lights, and you have to create an illusion that feels real. You'll see a load of individual candles flickering away, and it's great because it casts a certain kind of beautiful soft light, and it also provides some lighting movement within the frame that just helps reinforce the grandeur of the occasion.
When Van Ryven arrives to the dinner, there I indulge to be a little realistic. All the light on the characters actually comes from the torches. You can work with torches. It's quite difficult to work with candles.
This is a film where glances and looks are as important as dialogue. So we had wide shots, we had close-ups of different sizes on the characters. I had some cutaways, as we call them, of events that were happening elsewhere. And I could piece this scene together in 10, 15, 20 different ways.
In the editing room, the filmmakers had to infuse characters who were otherwise silent with emotions and motives.
I think the cutaways of Katerina, Vermeer's wife, are quite significant. She's constantly looking towards Vermeer. She's never sure that he realizes that he mustn't argue.
The choice of shots, I think, is very important. They're in a two-shot together, so you can see her reacting to what he's doing all in one shot.
So, have you decided